This is what we doing, man. About to do a brake change. But guess what I'm watching? What is this on TV? Paid in full, baby. Money making Mitch. Ace Boogie, you know what I mean? That's what we doing, man, while we working on the old school 560 SEC. About to do a brake change. If you don't remember this movie, man, it was a classic Rockefeller movie. It had I think it was two 560 SECs in that joint, man. You had the one that Damon Dash pulled up in, the silver joint, and then you had the black one, the black on black one. The Ace Boogie and his man was sitting in while they was vibing, you know? Man, let me tell you, that movie is based on the 80s. Classic film, man. Classic car, classic hit. I'm feeling like Ace Boogie. All right, you see these big, weird, long bolts? I've never seen this before. So on the previous 500 SEC I had, that was the Euro joint. It didn't have these kind of bolts. I mean, those are weird. But, you know, I figured it out. I got a lot of different bolts, man, I can use. It was also short one bolt. There was 4 instead of 5. So somebody lost a bolt. And obviously, it hasn't been in there in a while because those threads are not even bothered. A lot of corrosion on that thread right there. So the rotors themselves look good. There's no lip on it. No lip at all. But that pad is shot. And I'm assuming the other side is shot because the notification that I get when you hit the brakes is that the pad light comes on. The brake pad light comes on. Also, while I'm up under here, I might as well check this rear suspension because it's bouncy than a mug. They say that the accumulator needs to be replaced, and that's that right there. That black hydrogen ball right there. I'm sure it's out of hydrogen and probably fills up with the fluid, and there's no balance there when you hit a bump. No resistance there, so it's a bouncy ride. Not a harsh ride, just bouncy. It doesn't feel tight. All right, more to come. Hey, nice Brembo brake pads. Even comes with a decal. Look at that. Pretty nice. They even wrap them up all nice with this type of paper. This is nice. Pretty cool, man. Pretty cool. Yeah, these are pretty low. There's no sensor on this rear right passenger side. The sensor probably is on the left driver's side. But combination of tools, a little bit of cleaner, a little penetrating oil just to help get things loose, get them pins out. But this is the most simple brake change ever. Mercedes, I love you. You know, you push the pins out, slide the pads out. No removal of calipers. How easy is that? I remember my CLK was like that, my 99 CLK 430. This is why I love Mercedes. I always do a comparison also with the brake pads before you put the new joints in. I always look at these, make sure they're the same size, because sometimes they'll be a little different. Sometimes you got to shave them, clean them up a little bit, curve them, whatever, if the edges are too sharp. You know, I've dealt with that in the past with other manufacturers, other cars. Brake pads are not always perfect because anytime you go after market, they're not made obviously on the same assembly line or using the same lathe or cutting or press machine or whatever. However they put this crap together, it's not always universal, the technique, the processes. So that's why people always recommend going with Mercedes OEM, because you always know what you're getting. But obviously, Mercedes is not the only people that make good brake pads. And Brembo, in this case, you know what I mean? They make these brake pads. But there's a lot of good brake pads out there, so don't get caught up in names necessarily, but I always do a comparison. All right, so here goes the difference of these bolts that I pulled off of the rear wheel and the bolts that I have. Now, these are 12 by, what is it? 12 by 1.5. Like a standard Mercedes, I think is 14 by 1.5. And we're talking about the threads, basically the thickness of this right here, this bolt, from here to here. If this is making any sense. This is 12 by 1.5. 14 by 1.5 extends out. It's a little thicker like that. You know what I mean? The shaft is thicker. All right, so here goes the difference of the one that I pulled out of the rear wheel. This one right here, that looks excessively long. And these are the ones that I have. Now, these are 12 by 1.5. The newer Mercedes use 14 by 1.5, but the old school Benzes and the earlier models, even that CLK I was referring to before in a previous video, 1999 CLK 430 had the 12 by 1.5. It's a common bolt size, the thickness right here. Versus the newer ones, 14 by 1.5. The 12s were more popular in earlier models, and also the Audis, I think they had them too. Again, the earlier, like late 80s, well, the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. Well, the 99 was a late 90. For some reason, they held on to that. But all the new stuff in the bigger chassis, they went with the 14 by 1.5. Let's see. So, don't let the length of this bolt really fool you, because what's important is the contact of the wheel into the hub from here to here. Now this is conical, this is not the round type. This is the conical or the acorn style. I forgot what the other one is called. It'll come to me here in a second. Anyways, that's the conical. So this type right here goes the difference of what I'm talking about. This is more rounded. This is more straight, a sharper angle. I can't remember what this is called. Ball seat. There you go. Balls. So the ball seat right here is typically, what you get OEM from Mercedes. But for some reason, the rear on this one is this. And I'm assuming that this is OEM. Not only this is old, but it's such a unique design. This has to be Mercedes. So for some reason, they went with the conical style seating, which is okay, because I have a bunch of those. So what I was saying, don't get caught up in the whole length. What's most important is the contact of the wheel into the hub. So that's this size right here, these shorties. The difference would be that this would sit further inside the wheel. So you have to make sure that you use an adapter or a socket that can go that deep. And most standard 4-way wrenches can, it depends. Some of them can, some of them can't. So this is a safe bet. I'm not going with this one. I'm switching over to these because I have more than, I think I have 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, actually. So I'll put these on the rear, and then I'll see what I'm dealing with in the front. But it's good to have extra bolts because you never know. You already know I'm going to go aftermarket on this wheel, on this car. I'm going to do aftermarket wheels. So I could likely need, longer ones, especially if I use a spacer. Then I'll need longer lug bolts. So you never know, I have plenty of 14 by 1.5 because those are for the newer Mercedes, but it's good to have a collection of 12.5, 12 by 1.5, just in case. And in this case, I'm glad I held on to them because I need them. All righty, back to work. And again, this video I'm making now is because I only have 4. I took 4 off of that wheel. That's unsafe. Is it doable? Yeah. Will it come off? Not likely. But do you want less security or what it is meant to have? So I'm going to switch over to these so that I have 5 on each wheel in the back. And like I said, we'll see what I come across in the front. All righty, more information to come. Yo, this rear sway bar on both sides of the 560 SEC, they wore out. Listen to that. Yeah, that's right here when I'm hitting bumps. You see that wear down there, right? You see right there, man, it's even going through the plastic. The metal, the ball part of it, it's like a ball joint kind of, I guess it's wore out. It's not supposed to be played like that. And it's not supposed to be making noise like that. So this piece right here, you can buy those for cheap. So that has to go. All right, so I have the front wheel off. And to my surprise, first of all, in the rear, I expected at least one side to have a sensor, but neither side in the rear has a wheel or a pad sensor, a brake pad wear sensor. Guess what? There are two in the front on one side. On the driver's side, there's two. So maybe there's two on the passenger side as well. I mean, good Lord. That's well, I guess because it has ABS suspension. What is it? ABS? Yes, ABS braking. Maybe they can. I'm sure they communicate somehow. I don't know. But for there to be two and two, I'm assuming there's two on the other side because the kit came with 4 total. I'm impressed. I'm surprised as well. I never seen this before. Not 2 on one hub, but you know, Mercedes has always been ahead of the game. All right, we'll see how it goes. So while you're up under here, always make sure that you look around, that you pull and tug and grab them. Hold on. I'm holding this wheel while I'm talking to you. Hold on. Let me drop this over here. All right. Oh, God dang. Oh, that ain't gonna work. God dang. Just chill out, man. So while you're up under here, always look around, look for leaks, look for anything that's wore out. I see here that I have a little bit of wear too. Back up in here, this bushing. I forgot what that's called, but I'll look it up. But I think that's included in the paperwork, actually. Hold on, let me tell you. That's this right here. Both front suspension guide rod bushings are wore out. And that's what they're talking about, is right up in here. This is the rod bushing right here, this whole rod. So you have it in the front where it connects, and it runs to the back right here. So they're saying it's not play in there, but that's supposed to be a nice, clean, solid rubber piece back in there. I don't know, it's hard to see with this light, but back up in there, that's wore out. All right, that's cool. Also, there's a little bit of play right here. Let me see if I can do this. When I go like this, you can feel it. It's a little bit of play right here. All right, so this is gonna have to get swapped out at some point. This is the tie rod, the outer tie rod. Now it looks like this piece right here comes apart. You would have to mark it and check out the exact length. When you put a new one in, make sure that length is the same, make sure the threading is the same. So count the threads, and that'll help you to avoid having to get an alignment. It's always recommended you get an alignment anytime you get tie rod or front suspension work done, such as that affects directly the alignment. But if you know what you're doing, a good mechanic, you can count the threads and make sure that you get that exact length. And that'll actually firm up and tighten up that alignment. Anything else? I mean, I checked, looked around, pulled, tugged a little bit, whatever. Things look okay besides that. And this is on the driver's side, front. Man, I hate this big old nipple that they put on here. That limits the kind of wheels that you can put on here, and also the offsets and the spacers that you need and all that kind of crap. Anyways, I have Brembo pads now, so that's good. Now I have to do the passenger front, and that's it. All right, the sensors were easy. It's been pretty simple. If you ever changed brakes before, again, Mercedes is the easiest brakes to change on specific models. All you have is a pin holding them in place. That releases that spring, and you can slide them right up out of that joint, man. That's perfect. Beautiful. I love Benz. And so once again, changing these front brakes and rear brakes on these 560 SECs is very, very simple. What I use is a special little a broken tool. Okay, this right here is a little star bit that came out of the handle. But I use this to go inside these holes right here where the pin runs through. This pin right here, right now it's already pushed out, but it runs through the back side of the caliper into each individual brake pad, and it comes back out through the front of the caliper right here. It's the most simple thing. You initiate the removal of the pin by tapping it. I use this hammer right here. Use anything that can fit right here that can start the tapping. I mean, you're only going to see like the very tip of the nipple of that pin. It only extends out probably 3 or 4 millimeters, very small. But you just tap that to get it started. I always start off with a little lubrication. I use PB Blaster. I spray the pins just to break up the rust. Let it sit for a few minutes and then get the tapping. Worst thing you can do with an old Benz is to break those pins unnecessarily. and then that stops the whole job. You don't need to do that. Just spray it with some PB Blast or some WD-40. Let that saturate and then tap it out, and it slides out very simple. As it slides out, like this is the spring that it keeps in. Let's see, the spring right here goes behind each pin, and you can actually compress it a little bit, push it in, and that takes off some of the resistance off of the pin itself. It's hard to do it right now. Let me see if I can angle this. All right, so what I'm talking about is this. I push back on that spring. That allows you to slide the pin out a little easier. Okay, it slides right out. That's what I'm talking about. And you can clean this pin up if you want to, but depending on how clean this is, how lubed it is, how shiny and smooth it is, has no effect on the brakes actually working. All this does, it keeps the brakes in place. The brake pads do not slide on this, meaning it doesn't use this to operate. All it does is keep them in place. So this does not have to be nice, shiny, okay? So you can rub it off the rust, rub the rust off, whatever you need to do. You can shine it up, smooth it out if you want to, but that's more or less for cosmetic purposes. It does not inhibit or take away from the proper function of these brake pads. I've already loosened, like I said, both top and bottom. Again, just compress that back right there and it slides out. Do the same thing when you put it in. Push the spring back and it slides in even easier. Again, you can clean that up if you want to. It might make it easier to push in and pull out, but what keeps this pin in is this sleeve right here. It's like a slightly tapered, thicker towards the back end, tapered towards the front of it. It's like a compression pin or whatever, compression sleeve. So as you tap this pin in, that right there is what keeps it in place, not how clean and smooth it is. But again, if you want to, this is a Benz, if you want to, go ahead. You know what I mean? The brake rotors, whatever, the pads and all that, I mean, they have natural rust and wear and age to them, so they're not pretty. You can make them pretty if you want to, especially if you're trying to get top dollar, if you're about to sell it or something like that. Put the extra money into it, time into it. I'm going aftermarket on the wheels, so certainly I'm gonna clean this up and make it nice. I always paint my calipers red, so I'm gonna do that, you know what I mean? Because I just gotta have some pretty calipers when you look inside my wheel. I want you to see that. These right here, well, I guess I can remove this. Let's see. So now this is broken loose, but you have these sensors that are keeping this in. On the other side, one sensor was above the spring and the other sensor was underneath the spring. Matter of fact, yeah, that's how it was. All right, so you can remove these. This is a simple removal. The contacts are simple. Do the same thing on this one. I can do that by hand. I don't need a special tool to do that. So these sensors right here are kind of in the way. At this point, what you have to do is you have to release some of this tension on the calipers and the pad. Now my pads are worn down pretty far. So my calipers, pistons are pushed out pretty far, and that's why my brakes were soft. So what I gotta do now is create some leverage here. Get inside here in between there, and you can just break some of that loose there. That's what I tend to do. Break a little bit of that loose. Give me some leverage. Don't do it hard. Don't force it. It's going to come out. No problem. All right. Now be careful. I don't want to break these sensors. Sometimes these sensors will pop right out of there. Sometimes they're a little difficult. I'm not saving the sensors, but I don't want to damage them unnecessarily because I probably am going to save them. You never know. These sensors might wind up on eBay if they're not tore up. But anyways, so I'm going to put the phone down because what I have to do is I got to use, typically what I use is some of these right here. And so I put the teeth, these adjustable pliers, or whatever you want to call them. They're not plumber pliers. What are these things? Whatever they're called. I use them right here and right here, and I'll squeeze, and they'll pull the calipers or the pads. It'll pull the pads back, which will pull the piston back, which will give me that space that I need. Then at that point, I'll be able to have the space I need to go ahead and pull this spring up out of here without damaging these sensors. Again, you can just like manhandle it if you want to, But why? Just take your time, do it the right way. I gotta put the phone down to do it. Oh, maybe I can just put it down like this. Can you still see? All right. That's what I do. Squeeze them back. Squeeze them. Squeeze them. There we go. All right. There you go. Squeeze it like that, baby. That gives you a little bit of play right there. And I'll do the same thing here. See how that works? And that gives you that leverage that you need. Now it comes right out. Boom. You see that, baby? Nice and simple. Nice and simple. You know what I mean? Now, also, I can pull these joints out. Woo! Wait, look at that. See, that's that wear. See, that's where that sensor was making contact with the metal and grounding out and causing my brake pad sensors to come on. You cannot save these pads. These sensors. That's done. That's done. Now you can reinstall them, but why? Why? Why would you reinstall these? They're done. Okay? Now that's what these sensors are supposed to do. Once this pad breaks down, eventually it'll get down to the sensor and it will cause that to ground out or short out. Every time you press the brakes, it makes contact, it grounds out. That's a positive voltage running through there. I don't know how many volts, but it doesn't matter. It's a sensor. And when it shorts out, it makes contact with ground. Then boom, time to change some brake pads. I love Mercedes. This is a 1989 and they had that crap. You know what I mean? Come on, man. Come on, man. New technology is old technology. Ben's been doing this crap. Same thing here. So that passenger side, man, is worn down to the sensors. That's a lot of wear right there. So that's what was throwing my code. That's good stuff right there, baby. So basically what I do at this point, I clean this up. Get that brake cleaner. Now if you don't have brake cleaner, because I ran out already, I use carb choke cleaner. Just as effective. I don't know what the difference is. It does the same thing to me. Gets a lot of that excess grime and grit up out of there, man. Now you have sensors there, so let that dry out. Because those connections right there, you want that to dry out. And this stuff dries out pretty quick. So go ahead. Finish the job. What I do is I keep pushing these pistons back. Now you can put a pad in there, like a worn pad, and press it back. Let me get this sensor up out of here. It don't matter. Sensor's done. All right, so I throw that pad back in there. I use that as a spacer so I can use this bar for leverage to pull the pistons back even further. You want the pistons pulled back, man, so you can put the new pads in. You want them pistons back. I also take the cap out of my brake reservoir. I take the cap off just to relieve that pressure. So when I'm doing this, I'm not pressurizing the system unnecessarily. I'm pushing them pistons back. All right? That's adding pressure to the system. You don't want to bust a line or something like that. Some people will take the bleeder screw and loosen that up and let it flow out. But then you got to add fluid. I don't want to do that. Some people do that. I don't do it. To each his own. Whatever. This is safe. You're good. Like I said, man. Take that cap off the reservoir. You straight. All right. Here go my new Brembo joints. And my sensors are right here. I'm still in love. All right, so there go my sensors. All right. So what I do is I insert these before I do anything else. Insert them. I grease the backside of this. That's what make contact with the pistons. Just because, look at them. They're just nice and worn out. That's rubber. That's actually like a little metal plate with rubber behind it. You get rust on it, you know. I just do that so you're kind of lubricating that metal contact, less crap in between, less friction, lubrication. I don't know, lubrication is a good thing sometimes. All right, so there you go. I'm gonna go ahead and put this thing back together, man. You see those sensors right there? Like I said, make sure they're dried out, and they are. That brake cleaner and carb cleaner stuff dries out pretty quick. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this thing back together, man. While I'm in here, of course, I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that my stuff is tight. Now with the wheel on, I did play around with the side to side, rocking it side to side. There is obvious play on this lower tie rod. It's gonna be hard to do when you don't have a wheel on because you have less leverage. But it did, rock around a little bit. So both sides need to be replaced, man. If you're gonna do one side, you might as well do the other. Also check the inside. This is the outer tie rod. Make sure that the inner doesn't have play. Everything else looks pretty decent. Looks pretty decent. You got that same wear right there to that bushing, just as I do on the other side. Pretty simple up in here, man. I like it. I like it. Again, Mercedes always ahead of its time, man. All right, so I had the new pads in. I greased the back up and put them in. Put the spring in place. I had the sensors in place. And so at this point, let me go and put this thing down. All right, so at this point, let's put these pins back in. Like I said, you relieve tension, you push the spring back like here as you're sliding this pin in. Again, you can lubricate the pin if you want to. That will just help with the buildup of rust and crap, that, make it easier to remove it next time. Let me see, slide that thing in to the point where you can see the front end of it, the little nipple of it right there. Make sure you can see that. Make sure it lines up well with the hole. I don't tap them in until I tap them both in. So I do the same thing here. Push this back. Leave room for you to slide that pin in. Make sure everything lines up. You can relieve that pressure right there. Check this back side. Make sure the pin lines up with this hole. If it doesn't, just likely the pad might be in a little bit too far. You can just do that right there. Kind of play with it. Make sure that hole lines up. Make sure the pin lines up. There you go. Then I take the little hammer, take the little pin that I have. The little guide pin that I use. Well, that's what it is now. Still a star bit. Now, it's more leverage in the back, more space in the back to use a hammer to tap the back side. But in the front, there's more stuff. So I use this right here. Use anything that you can, that you have at your disposal, just to get it started. You can use an extension on a socket extension, whatever. But just use something that allows you to tap that back in. Matter of fact, I might have to get with something a little shorter because this top one is kind of long. Whatever. All right. Check the front end. Make sure, it's lined up perfectly. That's what I'm talking about. Make sure that nipple is right there, centered in that hole. You don't want to start banging it from the back and it's not lined up perfectly. Now at this point, you can go ahead and connect these sensors. They just slide right in, man. Push them in until they stop. All right, there you go. They're in there snug. And again, you'll just tap the backside in right here. Boom and boom. All right, get something short that allows you to take a hammer and tap them in. Like I said, I use this to tap it out because the front of it is small enough to fit in that hole. It goes in far enough where I can take the backside, take some pliers and pull the pin out. And when tapping it back in, I'm gonna get something a little shorter than this just because I don't have enough space between here and here. I mean, I'm hitting it at a weird angle. It's unnecessary. Just get something shorter, man, something stubby. You know what I mean? Half the length of this. Put it up against that backside. Tap it in with the hammer, and you're good to go. It doesn't take much hitting. I mean, they go right back in, and then you're done. So, if your brake pads look like this, get rid of them. Go, let it go. All right. Make sure you put the cap back on the brakes, brake fluid reservoir. Make sure you tighten that back up. But before I did that, I pumped my brakes just to get that pressure, get that pressure back in the in these brake caliper. All right. So because when you pull them back like that, you do push back the fluid, and you're not putting air in the system, but the system needs to be primed or pumped back up. You know what I mean? That pressurized, repressurized is what I'm trying to say. So when you get finished doing that, then I went on ahead and put my cap back on. Make sure that's nice and tight. Make sure my fluid level is good. You see that? My fluid level is good. And it's ready to go, baby. Make sure your wheels are tightened back up. Make sure they don't fly off while you're on the highway. Make sure you drop the car, move the car, and then tighten them back up again. You can do it to spec, or just make sure they're tight and evenly tight all the way around. When I put my wheels back on, I do a star pattern, and then I start tightening them the same way. Make sure they're tightened up in that star pattern, man. These are lug bolts, not lug nuts. A little different. You got to make sure they're tightened properly, one at a time in a star pattern. You don't over tighten them initially. You make them tight, and then you crank them down finally in that star pattern after all lug bolts are tightened. It's hard to explain, but you know what I'm saying. You don't crank them down the first time. Make them hand tight, and then do them by hand tight with the tool, and then you do it, to spec in a star pattern. I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense, but hopefully it resonates and you can understand where I'm trying to go with it. Maybe I'm just tired, but you know what I'm saying. I'm just whatever. You know what I'm saying. Let me finish off my logo. There you go. So, if your brake pads look like this, get rid of them. Swap them out.